Want to use a PGR in your cereals but have no time for a separate pass? Manipulator PGR can be applied as early as 1 tiller. Just add it to your herbicide to reduce lodging, increase harvest efficiency, and maximize yields. Talk to your retailer for more info and to confirm acceptable tank mixes.
I am your host, Lindsay Smith, and joining me now is the one, the only Chuck Penner of Leftfield Commodity Research. Hello, Chuck. How are you?
It's a good thing there's only one. Yeah.
The world could not handle more.
No.
More
Did
Chuck
you
Penners.
know that? Did you know that if you are 1 in a million, there are still 8,000 people just like you?
Oh, I would. Oh, so I'm
There's
not
8 billion people, right? If you do the
Yeah.
math.
Okay. So we
Yeah.
are not beautiful and unique butterflies, is what
Right.
you're trying to tell us, Chuck.
That's what I'm
Okay,
saying.
Thanks for that. Okay. Speaking of beautiful and unique butterflies, let's talk about the pulse markets. But more importantly, India has made some changes, some announcements on how it is managing pulse imports and the tariffs applied. What is the latest? What do we need to know?
Well, the news was this was kind of, it wasn't a huge surprise, at least to us. We were kind of watching this, tracking this, and that sort of thing. But what they did this last weekend was they announced, or earlier in, I guess it was December, they announced that they would take their 50% import tariffs on yellow peas specifically, and they would drop it to 0. And they extended that, I think, to the end of February, and then they extended it again, and then they extended it again, and so now it's been extended again to the end of October. So that's a more meaningful shift, in my opinion. At the same time as they did that, they have a 60% import tariff on Desi chickpeas, which we don't really grow, but they compete with yellow peas in that market, and that was dropped to 0 to the end of March. So for all of these other crops, for a bunch of different pulse crops, they have 0 tariffs, and they run to the end of March, which is the end of their marketing year. But for peas, they just keep kicking this down the road a little bit at a time, just teasing us, right? Just, a little bit at a time. But this October thing is more important because now it rolls into the new crop for us, so the 24 crop. So we'll be able to ship peas against that.
Now, as you said, I mean, this has been little bits at a time, and so keeping tabs on this. What is driving, do you think, this larger commitment to kicking it quite out in front all the way to October?
Right. Well, they finished their Rabi harvest at the kind of March, April-ish timeframe is when they do that, most of that. And so some of their crops, their lentil crop was okay and that kind of stuff, but their Desi chickpea crop and the pea crop, from what we understand, was also smaller. And so really what we've been tracking is prices for peas and Desi chickpeas in India to see if the government would respond. And really what they're trying to do is they're trying to keep food prices under control. So that's the big thing. There's elections going on there right now, all of that kind of stuff. So they're trying to keep food prices under control to keep the voting public happy. So that's the underlying thing that's driving that. So now it's been good news, or it is good news for Canadian farmers.
Mm-hmm. I listened to a podcast about India's elections. They take 6 weeks, not of a campaign, the actual voting takes 6 weeks.
Yeah, they do it state by state. So,
yeah.
If you think, knowing what's happening on the East Coast here and the West Coast, whatever, they've got that.
They have 6 weeks of elections, which is just wild.
Yeah.
So yes, as you mentioned, though, that does create, because there's an election happening, there is this added incentive, of course, to keep the public happy and make sure that, they can afford the food that they want and need. We are here first week of May. There is crop in the ground in many areas and will continue to be for going in for the next couple of weeks. Does this advent of pushing this on the pea side through to October, does this potentially switch some acres, or is this really just good news for everybody who already had their pea acres committed?
I think it's going to be not cause a huge change in acreage. There might be a little bit here and there, but not really. I think it's more important that the prices are moving higher a little bit. But the difficulty with the Indian market is that Russian peas also have access to that market, and Russia is growing the initial estimates were sky high, and now they've kind of scaled them back because they have some cropping issues there, some heat and some frost and some things like that. So they have a little bit of that kind of thing going on, but it's so that's going to kind of cap the market. If we had India buying big volumes of just Canadian peas, yeah, they could clean us out in a hurry and so on. And then you also have to have China buying at the same time to really get that rally going. So we've seen a little bit of strength on new crop bids, and actually this week I was looking at bids just earlier today and looking at old crop bids, which really haven't moved much.
Okay.
Because I think there's just not many peas left to buy, old crop peas left to buy. So a little bit of strength on new crop. But I don't know, without a serious problem, we're not going to see a runaway rally. But it's still good news, better news than the opposite, that's for sure.
Now, is the Russian competition sort of new on the pea front, or have we always been in the same market as them?
Well, they've come into the Chinese market in the last 10 months or so. They came to an agreement on a phytosanitary barrier, and now Russian peas at times, China's importing more peas from Russia than they are from Canada. So some months that happens. So yeah, they're a serious player there. They haven't really been exporting a lot to India, but their crops last year was a record crop of about 4.7 million tons. This year could be somewhere in that same ballpark. So they have more peas to export now just in the last couple of years.
Mm-hmm. Now, we've mentioned, of course, China and India and how these things sort of switch. When Canadian peas were priced out of the Indian market, we saw China come on board and sort of saved our bacon, if you will, our plant-based bacon. Now we see, so is India removing this tariff? Does that, like, where is China in all this? Has China still been buying, or has China dropped out of this picture?
Well, China had bought, again, a whole lot from Russian peas. So they're sitting on some pretty big inventories. So their Chinese imports have really gotten quiet the last 2-3 months or so. I don't know that that's a sign of an ongoing problem, or whether it's just kind of a seasonal thing or a cyclical thing or something like that. So yeah, it's a little bit of a concern. I think China will still buy for fall delivery and that sort of thing, but right now they don't have that urgency. And again, they can play Russia off against Canada. So
Right.
there's a little bit of that going on. So yeah, again, you need both China and India buying at a really strong clip to really send this thing strongly higher. But yeah, if India hadn't come into the market now, we would be heading in the opposite direction, in my opinion.
Where do lentils land in all of this? Are they a player in either of these markets?
Well, not the Chinese market, the lentil market. Yeah, India is still the largest buyer. They had a decent crop. Their Rabi harvest was decent, but now we're competing much more. Australia is a much stronger competitor than they have been. So the last 2 to 3 years, they've been quite a strong competitor. And so that, again, keeps a lid on that type of a market. So it's not related to those tariffs are at zero and have been for quite a long time. But we just got the stocks report today, and there's very low supplies of lentils and of peas in Western Canada. I don't quite think they're as low as StatsCan says, but regardless, pretty tight supplies. So right now we're in a bit of a friendly situation, and my thing is, what I'm wondering now is we're getting more of this rain in the southern prairies. Might that actually discourage some lentil acres because of concerns about disease, root rot, and that sort of thing? So that's a possibility too.
Definitely, yes. Seeing reports of several pockets of moisture happening in areas that desperately need it. But you're right, some of these crops don't like wet feet, and so
as soon as you talk about the rain, it's funny. They say, "Well, the crop isn't made yet." I'm not saying that. I'm just saying for the next few weeks, it's looking good. Better than it was the last year or 2 years or 3 years. So anyway, whatever. That's the way. That's the way that discussion goes.
We know in Saskatchewan, you never say that there's ever too much rain, because whenever it rains, you just want it to keep raining, even if it ends up wet. You never say.
Well, or there's the really old joke. What's the difference between a flood and a drought? Well, about 1/4 of an inch. So, yeah.
That sounds about right, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially in some of those areas. So yes, okay. Well, we'll continue watching this, Chuck. Thanks so much for bringing us up to date on what's happening there. Let us know if anything changes major, and who knows, maybe we'll have a huge demand come out of China and India at the same time and just drive
That would be
prices crazy.
fantastic.
Wouldn't
Yep.
that be great?